On today's show, the Hawks are in Las Vegas. I will be there shortly, and we'll dive in now to what is going to be a very interesting game on Saturday against the Milwaukee Bucks in the NBA Cup semifinals. All eyes on the Hawks. We'll get into all of what to expect and more coming up.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1866 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Friday morning here in mid-December ahead of a fantastic game, very interesting game, I would say, at the very least, between the Hawks and the Bucks in Las Vegas. And today's show is brought to you by the folks at Robinhood Gold. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of the high net worth for any net worth. These benefits are now available for $5 a month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up now at robinhood.com/gold. I also want to encourage you at the top of the podcast, make sure first listen each and every day here at Locked On Hawks. Check us out anywhere you get your podcasts on the audio side. Plus, we're on YouTube. Please like the video on that platform. And I'll be diving in to what's going to be a very interesting game, of course. First, though, I'll begin the show with a mailbag question before I get to the NBA Cup matchup between the Hawks and the Bucks in Las Vegas. And as you can see, I am kind of en route there now. I will be there later tonight, which is why this podcast is coming when it is instead of in the evening. Anyway, first question on the podcast comes from Kirk, and it's a good way to kind of get into how the Hawks have played recently. I noticed that, this is the question now from Kirk, I noticed that after the Knicks game, the Hawks are still having a negative point differential for the season, even with their winning record. I'm not distressed about smoke and mirrors, but how much of this has to do with the early injuries and how much of this has the Hawks getting slightly lucky with their play? So good question here from Kirk. Just to lay out the point that he's making here, the Hawks do have a negative point differential for the season. Point differential / net rating. If you pull out all the garbage time, like cleaning the glass does, it's about a -1 net rating. It's a little bit worse than that in the raw point totals, but I trust cleaning the glass more, especially when there's a bigger sample size by now. But even then, that would basically tell you that by point differential and net rating, the Hawks should be, quote unquote, should be like 12 and 14 instead of 14 and 12. That's not a huge difference after this many games, but notable anyway. Part of that is that the Hawks are 8 and 5 in what the NBA describes as clutch games. So they've won close games. They perform well at close games. That accounts for some of that noise, I would say. And they also have no blowout wins, which is a big point. They do have 6 double-digit wins. They have a win by 15 points, 12 points, 11 points, 16 points, 12 points, 15 points. So they have some decently comfortable wins, but no total blowouts on that side, which kind of caps your win differential. I mean, it's your point differential somewhat in that way. And they do have 3 blowout losses of 23 points or more. All those against good teams, so nothing to really worry about there. And some of those were injury related, etc. But that's kind of why the Hawks are where they are. But look, there have been many jokes, especially in the last couple of days nationally, about the Hawks losing to the Wizards twice, losing to Portland, etc. While also beating Cleveland twice, beating New York twice, beating Milwaukee, and of course winning in Boston. Some of that is the NBA is a league where anything can happen on any day, which I always try to tell people on the podcast, like, yes, there are projections. Yes, there are betting markets. Yes, there are what you expect teams to do, but a lot can happen. These are all pros, and it's one game. Things can happen in crazy fashion. But long story short, I would say a good bit of the volatility here has to do with the early injuries, to the question from Kirk. My friend Kevin Chouinard of Hawks.com and 82129 shared a helpful visual of this on social media on, I think, Wednesday night. But I'll touch on that a little bit now. In both of the Wizards losses, which of course were bad losses, I don't want to be flippant about that. You shouldn't lose those games anyway. But the Hawks were down at least 3 of their top 8 players in both of those games. They missed Bogey and Hunter for both those games. They missed Dyson in one of those and Onyeka in the other. Bogey and Hunter didn't play in the Portland game either. So kind of a theme there. The 3 worst losses for the Hawks this season did not have Bogey or Hunter in them, plus at least one of the other guys for a couple of those games as well. Of course, in the last 8 games, the Hawks were 7-1. And ironically, or not so ironically, the Hawks' only game where they did not play well and did not win was the game where they were without Jalen Johnson and Bogey against Denver. Now, I'm not saying those guys would have made the whole difference in that game, but certainly it would have been more competitive. I feel strongly about that if they had their healthy team. Atlanta is now, by the way, 11-4 when DeAndre Hunter plays this year. And it's not only because of Hunter being awesome, and he's been really good lately, but they're also 10-3 with Hunter and Jalen both playing this year. They're 8-3 when Hunter and Bogey both play this year. They're also 0-2 without Dyson Daniels this year. So, I can keep going, but it's pretty clear the results are substantially tied to injuries. Now, that's the case for a lot of teams. So I'm not saying that's like an outlier for the Hawks. You have to be able to function when you are not healthy, which is at least part of the challenges for the Hawks right now. They do have good depth, but they have like kind of finicky depth in some respects. Anyway, it is pretty clear to me that the results are tied to that. On the defensive part of the question from Kirk, I think it's almost even more traced to injury on defense because I shared part of this stat earlier this week, but I think it's kind of informative of what the Hawks have been defensively. And if you've missed it in recent days, I've been banging the drum. I did it again on Wednesday night after the win against the Knicks, that the Hawks have been playing basically really, really well defensively, like at a top 10 level for the last couple of weeks. And that's a big change, of course, from previous seasons. Right now, the Hawks are almost exactly at league average in defensive rating at cleaning the glass. They have about 114.7 defensive rating for the full season. And that's already a marked and big time improvement on previous years. But you still see some of the eye rolls on people getting excited about this. Like even when I'm sharing my defensive encouragement on the Hawks, people that want to be pessimistic are like, wait, it's the Hawks. They're only league average, et cetera, et cetera. That's fine. But if you start looking at it a little bit further and look at the way they played in recent days when they've more importantly had kind of normal lineups, it's pretty encouraging defensively. So I'm not going to be mean here, I promise. But for example, if all you did was take out the minutes with David Roddy on the court, you can't do that. He played the minutes. But bear with me here. The Hawks would go from a 114.7 defensive rating to a 112.5 defensive rating just by taking away the minutes with Roddy. And that is 10th in the NBA if you just take those minutes away. Again, not trying to be mean to Roddy. He's a deeper bench guy. It's not his fault. He actually played pretty well on offense when he's playing in the rotation. But that's pretty striking to take away basically your 12th man just from the lineups, and your defense improves by 2.5 points per 100 possessions for the full season. And I also, like, if you wanted to say, all right, how good is the defense when they have the team that they had against the Knicks? And the answer is the team has been quite good when they have just their like normal rotation. Using cleaning the glass, I filtered out all of the minutes involving guys who did not play in the Knicks game, except for Kobe Buffkin, who's been like obviously in the rotation a lot. Everybody else I took away. So that's no Garrison, that's no deeper bench guys, Roddy, Nance, etc. And obviously you'll see some more of those guys play again in the future. There'll be injuries, etc. But when you do that and just use the team the Hawks have basically had when they want to have everyone available, essentially, they would have a 112 defensive rating. That is in the 67th percentile of the league, which would be 9th or 10th in the NBA this year. So that's really good, obviously. It's not uber elite, but it's really good. Now, again, this is a key point. Every team has injuries. You cannot just ignore them. They're going to happen, and it all gets baked in, which is why as the sample size gets bigger, you can't just ignore the stuff. But going a little bit deeper into things, it is fairly clear to me that the defense is mostly real when they have their normal guys, especially when they have guys like Dyson available, when they have Jalen available just for his relative rebounding and playmaking, etc. And that has led to overall success. By the way, using that same filter, taking out all the deep bench guys from the lineups in general, the Hawks go from having a negative point differential overall, like the question from Kirk asked me, and also they go all the way up to about a +3 net rating, which again is not elite, but that's like a 46, 47 win team, something like that over the course of a season. So again, you can't assume perfect health. I'm always one to bang that drum. Like you're going to have injuries over the course of a season. The Hawks have already had some. Occasionally, you'll have a season from hell, like the Pelicans right now, where just everyone's hurt all year long. It's a nightmare. But knock on wood, the Hawks have like reasonable health so far, with the exception of the one cluster injury early in the season at guard. And when they've had their guys, i.e. Hunter, i.e. Dyson, i.e. Jalen, even Bogey, who doesn't really help the defense, but obviously helps the offense a lot, they've been really good. So there's some encouragement in there. To answer the question one more time in kind of plain fashion, I'm not worried about the negative point differential right now because I think when they've had a little bit of margin stuff there. And yeah, you could certainly quibble if you were to sort of normalize their luck in close games. Maybe they would have a win or two less. But still, the bones of this team right now are kind of what they thought they were going to be preseason, which is basically a team that could be 500, is where I kind of projected them for the season, maybe even a little bit better than that. They're playing at that level. You want to hold on for health. Obviously, that's going to be a big factor moving forward. Even as soon as Saturday, like we don't know right as I'm recording this podcast on Friday morning about Jalen Johnson's ankle, for instance. Like you might miss some guys, but long story short, it's been really encouraging. And I think that, some of that's tied to luck, but some of that's tied to when they're good. They're pretty darn good right now, which is pretty positive for the Hawks. All right. So later on in the podcast, we'll get into the NBA Cup, including a look at what just happened when the Hawks played the Bucks about 10 days ago at this point in time, and we'll do all that in just one moment. Today's show is brought to you by Robinhood Gold. And with Robinhood Gold, you do not need a silver spoon to eat up the financial favors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and perks usually reserved for the high society. And now the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn the very liberal rate of 4.25% APY on uninvested cash and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on IRA account contributions. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of a high net worth for any net worth, and these generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at robinhood.com/gold. That's robinhood.com/gold. Terms apply. For product-specific disclosures, visit robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk. Rate may change. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold, LLC. All right, before I get to the final preview stuff for Saturday's game, I wanted to answer a question that many people had in the last couple of days about bonus money about the NBA Cup for guys on two-way deals in particular, which I didn't know the answer to until recently. So as I said before, I think at least once on the show, everyone on a standard contract, which is a full NBA deal, gets bonus money for reaching certain levels of the NBA Cup. For example, the Hawks are already guaranteed now almost $103,000 for making the Final Four of the NBA Cup. That would jump to over $200,000 if they make the final, and almost $515,000. Yes, $500K plus if they win the entire thing on Tuesday. As I've already said, that's not a lot of money for Trae Young and Jalen Johnson. I get that. But it is meaningful money if you're Vit Krejci or if you're Garrison Matthews or if you're Mo Gay making, yes, $2 million, but that's still real money to add to your salary. And what I would say this, it is very notable money and important money for guys on two-way deals, which are for the Hawks, Keaton Wallace, Dominic Barlow, and Seth Lundy. So people have asked about this. I finally found the answer from Tim Reynolds of the Associated Press, who's been covering the NBA for a long time. He wrote a story about two ways and the NBA Cup actually last year and found in the language that they do get the bonus money. It is only half, though, as much as a standard contract gets. So that's unfortunate, but still, they're getting real money here. So it's half of what I just laid out. That means that the Hawks two-way guys are already getting an extra $50,000 or so, which again, that's an annual salary for a lot of people. So that's not nothing. Could be $100,000 if they win on Saturday, $250,000 if they win the whole thing for a two-way contract. And for reference, two-way deals are not like super duper lucrative. Obviously, they are making more than I do in my life. But if you're on a two-way, you're not making $1 million. You're making less than that over the course of a season. So if you add $250,000 to that, that is some, I don't want to say life-changing, but certainly year-changing money for a guy on a two-way contract. Notable there, meaningful and intriguing. So also the Hawks called up all three of their two-way guys for the game on Wednesday in New York. They were not active, but they were on the bench and around the team. That gives them also a standard contract check for the game. So if you didn't know this, when guys are called up on two-ways, they're getting paid the league minimum for that game. So they do get more money when they're called up, generally speaking, per game. It was just honestly a stroke of brilliant fortune and luck because College Park had a game previously scheduled before the NBA Cup stuff was even happening. They obviously had no way of knowing they were going to play the Knicks on Wednesday. College Park had a game in Westchester, which is about an hour or less away from Madison Square Garden, on Wednesday morning. So it was really, really fortunate for those guys to be able to get around the team. They got a game check. They got to be around and on the bench, et cetera. That was a cool moment for those guys to experience that. So, just drove over, got some extra money, and they were around the team. They have been since sent back to College Park. I've not seen or heard that they're going to go to Las Vegas because right now the Hawks just don't need them to be active. They don't have the roster spots even because everybody's healthy. At least, knock on wood, everybody's healthy right now. So anyway, they will get some money, which is good for those guys. Okay. I wanted to somewhat quickly anyway, rehash what happened in the first Bucks game, it literally happened 10 days before this game is going to happen on Saturday. So it's pretty revelatory. You don't want to overdo it with one game, but it is a relevant data point, especially because it just happened and the rosters are somewhat similar. If you didn't follow that game closely, it was the fifth game in a row the Hawks had won. It was an upset win. The Bucks had won 7 games in a row coming in. They were playing really well. So were the Hawks. And I would say this, it was eerily similar to the Knicks game in many ways. They got down 10 early, for instance, and then basically played really well the rest of the game, as they did in New York. As they did in New York, Jalen and Hunter had big games. The Hawks did not shoot well in the Bucks game. 28% from three, 44% overall, and they still managed to win because they, once again, crushed on the margins. They had like 12 more shooting possessions in the game. They were awesome on the glass. They were awesome in transition. They didn't turn the ball over. All those things happened in the Knicks game as well. Also, that reminds me of something that I want to note last night. My friend Jared Dubin, who's covered the league for a long time, has been tracking this. The Hawks are now 6th in the NBA in overall possession battle this year. They're plus 3 possessions per game, which I know I am huge on that. When you don't have a great shooting team, you have to win the margins. The Hawks don't have a great shooting team right now, but that's a good stat. And all the teams above them are pretty good or better, I think, other than maybe the Sixers, who are just injury-plagued. But everybody else has been really good, and that's a good sign. They were better on offense in the Milwaukee game 10 days ago than they were against the Knicks on Wednesday, but it was still the defense that won that game in Milwaukee, which has been a theme for a lot of the recent 7-1 streak. Now, there have been a couple of awesome offensive games. The Cleveland games in particular were pretty good on offense, but defensively, it's been consistent and good the entire way through. New York was, of course, number 1 in offense when they came in. And as a reminder, if you haven't heard the podcast yet, I did a full breakdown of the game on Wednesday that you should listen to. But the Hawks slowed them to a crawl defensively. It was actually the Knicks' worst offensive game of the season by the numbers. And they were at home in a high-profile spot, and the Hawks just clamped down on them, which was really impressive. Milwaukee was not as good as that, but they were on a winning streak, and they had a 120 offensive rating in a 7-game winning streak before that. And the Hawks held them to exactly a 100 offensive rating in that game 10 days ago. Milwaukee did win the shooting battle, as the Knicks did, but nothing crazy. And the Hawks got every rebound and then had 16 steals. 16 steals in the game is a lot of steals. Now, there is one very notable change in the personnel of Milwaukee for the rematch, and we'll discuss that in just one moment. This show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Get on the NFL, NBA action, and much more this season with FanDuel. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook, and right now, if you're a new customer, bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. The FanDuel Sportsbook app is really easy to use. It gives you everything that you need to place your bets all in one place. And they have all the stuff you're looking for across the sports betting space, from over-unders to point spreads, money lines. They got player props and game props. They got future bets, same-game parlays, exotic bets, live betting, and so much more. The FanDuel app is safe and secure, and they also cover the entire range of sports as well. The NBA is the focus on this podcast. Also, right now, NBA Cup stuff, all of that you want to find at FanDuel. Plus, they have NFL, college football, the bowl season coming up, the playoff, etc., MLB, WNBA, hockey, golf, tennis. They have all kinds of soccer leagues, both domestic and international. They have F1, they have NASCAR, boxing, MMA, and so much more. And now is a great time to sign up with the folks at FanDuel Sportsbook, and the place to go is FanDuel.com to get started with $150 in bonus bets when you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com and $150 in bonus bets when you win that first $5 bet at FanDuel. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. I do have one more note about the NBA Cup because someone asked me, I forgot to write this down, so my apologies to the person who actually asked the question. But the Hawks have probably had the toughest road to Las Vegas of any team schedule-wise. As a reminder, they had to beat the Celtics on the road in the Cup section, in the groups play stage. They also had to beat the Knicks on the road in the quarterfinal, and they had to beat the Cavs, the red-hot 17-1 Cavs, at home to reach the Final Four. Now, they did lose to the Bulls, but that was a road game, and the Bulls shot the heck out of the ball in that game, 44% from three. So it was somewhat understandable that would happen. Not a great performance by any means, but not a tragic one either. That's not a huge takeaway to that, but other than it is possible with the way the Cup is designed to make it to Vegas without beating that many good teams. Like, I'm not saying the Hawks did that because they did not, but it's possible to get there without having a great schedule. In fact, like the Knicks, if they had made it, had a pretty favorable run. They played the Magic, yes, but they had played the Magic without Paolo Banchero, and their group was not very difficult necessarily. But the Hawks had to pull off literally 3 upsets to get to the semifinals. So not like it was a cakewalk road for a team that was quote-unquote not supposed to be there. Okay, let us preview the Bucks game on Saturday. As a reminder, if you've not noticed already, it's a 4:30 p.m. Eastern time start in Las Vegas. So 1:30 local time. I'll be there for that one. Early game. It's the Eastern Conference game. It would have been a surprise to me if they were playing later. And that's where the NBA ended up going. Also, the schedule was different this year. Last year, the semifinal was like during the week, so it was kind of an odd schedule. This time, it's at least on a Saturday, so a standalone window that everyone can watch. I want to just quickly note this. The Bucks are top 10 in the league in offense this year. They are elite in shooting efficiency, top 5. That a lot of that's Giannis, but of course they have Dame Lillard as well. But hey, Giannis and Dame are really good, so that's worth noting. They're also good. They're also good at taking care of the ball. I did not also note this earlier in my breakdown of the last game between the Hawks and the Bucks, but they attempted 35 free throws in the first game. Giannis got to the line at will in that one, and the Hawks are going to have to not do that again. Now, we'll say they were not happy at all with the way the game was officiated. Again, with Giannis getting the line ad nauseum, I agree with that one. Honestly, the Hawks being frustrated there, but they got to keep the Bucks off the free throw line, I would say. On the other side of the floor, though, Milwaukee is not great defensively. Now, this is not your older brother's Bucks. The Bucks used to be awesome defensively with Mike Budenholzer as the coach, with Drew Holiday at the point of attack. That team is long gone now. They were below average last year. They're below average this year defensively. I think the Hawks are actually better than the Bucks defensively, which is going to be crazy to say out loud, but I think it's true. They never forced turnovers when they didn't. I'm saying that they didn't do that really when they were good either, but they have fallen off a lot in rim protection and rebounding and free throw prevention. Some of the margin stuff has not been good for the Bucks recently. Now, I will say they're not awful defensively either. They're probably better than better than the Knicks are defensively in some ways, but they can get to some lineups that are good defensively, but they don't. What I'll say about this is they don't have a ton of guys who are great on both ends of the floor. Giannis is, of course, Brook Lopez has his strengths on defense and offense as well. Dame Lillard is a one-way player for the most part. They have their support guys, like they can go defense with Andre Jackson, they can go offense with Gary Trent, et cetera, but they don't have a ton of two-way guys. I will say this, though, I teased it earlier, they do have a personnel addition for this game, at least barring a surprise that I'm not aware of. Chris Middleton is back. He debuted a few days ago after the Hawks game. He's played in the last 3 games for the Bucks. He has not been individually fantastic, but he missed like 7 months, and now he's back, and he's one of their clearly 4 best players, along with Giannis, Dame, and Lopez, and they have been awesome when he has played in 3 games. They have a plus 19 net rating. Plus 19 net rating is obviously a great number, including a 129 offensive rating with Middleton on the court. That will continue, but I think we could safely assume that they are better with Middleton than without him. He is a legitimate, not like great defender, but certainly a two-way-ish wing player who can pass and shoot and make life harder on the Hawks. So keep that in mind. That's a tougher road, at least roster-wise, for the Bucks this time around. At the moment, I am recording this podcast before the injury reports come out. Because the Hawks are on the West Coast, their injury report will not be out until pretty late into Friday evening. Same with the Bucks, probably. And I am flying out tonight. So that's why I'm recording this podcast earlier. Keep that in mind when you're listening to this. You can certainly check and find the injury report somewhere else. But right now, pre-injury report on Friday morning, the Hawks are a 3.5-point underdog at FanDuel on neutral court, of course, in Vegas. People ask me this question, like, why are the Hawks underdogs? They just beat the Bucks in Milwaukee. Well, part of that is that odds makers don't like shift like that based on one game. I would say the Bucks were favored by more than 3.5 in the first meeting. They were at home, but they actually didn't have Middleton, and they didn't have a rest advantage in that game. Now, this time it's neutral court, but the Bucks have been they're the more pedigree team. They're the more high-profile team, which does matter in this kind of market stuff. They have a better net rating than the Hawks do as well. Like they've been, if you look at just their profiles this year, net rating would tell you that they're better than Atlanta. And they've also been good lately. They're 9-2 in the last 11 games. I will say this, though. I very much believe the Hawks are a very live underdog here. And I'm not surprised they're underdogs in the betting market, but they certainly have thrived in that role in recent days and certainly are capable of winning this game. By the way, the Hawks are also seen as the team that is the long shot to win the whole thing. They're plus 550 at FanDuel, which means they're like, sub 20% implied odds to win the NBA Cup title. Houston is plus 400. Milwaukee's plus 270. OKC is the favorite right now at plus 110. Not shocking there. OKC is the best team of the 4. We could just say that plainly. OKC is really good. And the Hawks have been playing the underdog role the whole tournament. They've embraced the underdog role in a lot of ways. By the way, it's not like, I'm not trying to say it's like the Cinderella story or anything like that, but the Hawks were 150-1 at FanDuel before the Cup started to win the whole thing. And they might have even been higher than that some other places. So they've done a great job against Vegas, the 3 upset wins I mentioned before. But I know they want to win it all, and they can win it all. I don't mean that in any flippant way. Like, they can certainly win these 2 games. No one is unbeatable. Even if it's OKC in the final, like the Hawks will be underdogs in that game too if they get there. But that's not like it's impossible to win. So there you go. Again, one more time, afternoon game on Saturday. I will have a podcast up as soon as I possibly can after the game. It probably won't be as quick as usual because I'll have to be covering the other game some, which is after the Hawks are done, plus get back to my hotel, navigate the post-game madness. But it will be there at some point on Saturday night. So have no fear. There will be a podcast probably from, it is what it is from the hotel. But that's going to come when it comes. Please subscribe to the podcast anywhere you get your podcasts on the audio side. I very much appreciate that. Everybody listening already and subscribing and downloading, et cetera. But anywhere you get your podcast on audio side, plus like the video on YouTube as you're watching it, and tell your friends, subscribe on audio and video. That's very much appreciated. Follow the show on Twitter/X at Locked On Hawks. Follow me there at BT Rowland. Follow me on Blue Sky at BT Rowland, and I will have some real-time updates as well from Las Vegas. So if you're listening to the podcast, you don't follow along with any other stuff that I do, the best place to get the live stuff and the pregame stuff, etc., is on social media. Also, I have my non-podcast coverage about the Hawks at patreon.com/BT Rowland. All right, that's all I have, and we'll sign off now. Thank you for listening very much, everybody, and I'll see you all on Saturday from Las Vegas.